if the sales profession continues to just cold call people, they're not going to have the results that they're looking for. And the CISO, who needs various solutions to add value in a manner to our teams and the organizations in the way that we expect it to, we're looking for more of a strategic partnership, and that's built by trust.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Kevin Morrison, Chief Information Security Officer at Alaska Air Group.
Well, hey, Todd. Well, thanks for having me. So I started off on the IT side of the house as a network administrator, and then a few years into that, as a result of dealing with various incidents, it just naturally kind of transitioned me into the security field. So as a result of those incidents, it got my attention, if you will, and it was attractive to me. I liked what it was that we were trying to do and solve and provide to the business and protecting the brand, et cetera. So that's kind of what led me down that path.
Oh, good. And you've stayed with it. You've had several. You've had several CISO roles in different companies, so you've gotten to see the landscape from several different vantage points.
I have, yeah. It's been interesting. Every organization's different. I've been in public and private industries, as well as organizations that have significant regulatory compliance initiatives and some that have none, or the requirements that are more just driven around the business and protecting that brand, and more focused on the security operations than any compliance activities. So kind of seen it from all different perspectives.
Which do you think are the easier? Not that any of this is easy.
That's a good question. I don't know necessarily, I don't know that there's an easier way. If somebody's in the profession just to check the box, then compliance might be that. But at the same time, if you're heavily bound by compliance, then you also have regulators that are possibly camped out in your conference rooms. So sure. I don't know that that's necessarily easy.
Yeah, so you always get the plus and the minus of each of those. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you wrote a very interesting piece about managing the security salesperson. So you want to take us into that?
Sure. So, it's funny. It actually started off by, I took a few days away from the office, and I came back to probably close to 50 voicemails from vendors with whom I had never spoken, didn't have any idea who they were, and they all started off the same way. Hi, Kevin, this is such and such. I'm calling to let you know about yada yada, right? Fill in the blanks. And honestly, it was like a cookie cutter script for these cold calls. And so I just put a little 2-sentence blip out on LinkedIn and says, guys, there's a better way to do this. And that struck a chord because that little 2-sentence post went viral to the tune of about...
I remember that.
It was crazy. There was about 450,000 views of it and thousands of people who had commented. And so, and some of the comments really got out of hand. So clearly it struck a chord there. And just decided I'm just going to delete the post entirely and then be a little more constructive and hopefully help reduce the friction that clearly exists between the sales folks and them trying to do their jobs with the security practitioner and the CISOs who are trying to focus on theirs. So I penned this 1-2-page article, if you will, on a CISO's advice on selling to CISOs. So that's kind of how it took off from there. And that really got a lot of good attention and sales teams have continually, to this day, honestly, reached out to me and said, Kevin, appreciate you writing that. That's really given some good insight. And it was really for the benefit of truly to help try to reduce the friction, because it seems like in this industry, it's a bit of, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? So, if the sales profession continues to just cold call people, they're not going to have the results that they're looking for. And the CISO, who needs various solutions to add value in a manner to our teams and the organizations in the way that we expect it to, we're looking for more of a strategic partnership, and that's built by trust. It's not built by cold calling or, the emails now that come through. Hey, I hope you appreciate my professional persistence. This is my 15th email to you, and I'm just bringing it back to the top of the stack. And no, I don't appreciate it. If I hadn't responded by the third or fourth email, it's not a good fit. It's not that I'm trying to ignore you. It's just I don't see a place for the technology in the roadmap, or it's just not the right time, etc. So, there's opportunities for both sides of the aisles to really help develop those relationships in a more healthy manner. And so, when you asked me to help contribute to the book, I was more than happy to do so, because it's definitely a topic that is...
and every CISO is dealing with that, especially people go away to a conference, their badge has been scanned, 50 times, and then so you get the ones that scanned your badge, and then you get all the people that didn't scan your badge that somehow got your name from a list somewhere. And so you're just inundated with things.
You are. And so, part of the article, which is taken from a little different slant than the angle that I took it in the book, which was more from the CISO's perspective, especially the newer ones coming into the role, how to approach that topic. And that is, you have to build your business cases, right? You have to have the requirements that will allow the vendor or your partner to come in, understand the risks that you're trying to mitigate or solve for, and allow them to clearly distinguish themselves and say, here's how we're going to solve that for you. Or, some way of adding value, whatever that might be. So those business requirements will help streamline the process when you're trying to build that internal case for justifying that investment. So to your boss, to the whomever holds the purse strings, whether it's...
And who builds that? The salesperson or the CISO?
The CISO partners with the salesperson to do that, but it should not be, here's a fancy technology and lay it in your lap. Okay, if I'm going to reach back out to that salesperson, it's because I see a potential fit. And if I see that potential fit, the idea then is that the salesperson will have or be able to develop with the CISO a business case that clearly outlines how it meets those requirements to drive that investment forward. Because if they're expecting you to spend hours on end to pitch it to your internal executive team on why you need to make that investment, well, then they're coming about it in a way that increases the friction and not reduces it. So,
sure.
Yeah.
So what does the CISO do when they get those emails? Do you start blocking those people, or do you respond to them, or what's the right approach?
Tal, that's a good question. I know everybody has a different approach to it, and this is not going to be a one size fits all. I think a lot of it comes to the tone of the person who's reaching out. And, one of the things that I mentioned in the article that I had written before the book was there's absolutely no better way for a vendor to establish that relationship than to already have a relationship with one of your peers out in the industry and say, hey, we're doing business with such and such, if they can do that, or even have, if they have that relationship with that CISO peer, to reach out to him or her and say, hey, would you mind introducing me to Kevin Morrison? I'd love to chat with him. And if it's a good relationship, absolutely, I would be happy to do that and say, yeah, this is a good solution. I see value in it. You guys have been a wonderful partner to deal with, et cetera. So yeah, I'd be happy to make that introduction for you. So if you can have that type of engagement, then certainly that email is going to be opened. There are times that I will open and take a look at the email, but one of the things I highlighted also in the article was it's a little bit of know your audience, right? So you have these cold emails, if you will, from individuals whom I have no relationship with, I do not know them, and they're wanting the CISO to click on links, right? Everything that we're coaching the rest of the organization not to do. So there's a little bit of know your audience there.
A great way to fish a CISO.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. So
here's some white papers you might want to take a look at.
Yeah. So and again, if they clearly define what it is that their solution provides, and if it's of interest to me, I will look up their solution online, Google, whatever. Go research it and go to their website directly, not click their link or open any attachments, and I will go look to see whether or not it's something that I want to pursue further, and if so, then respond to that person. And that honestly, that's a very small percentage of time that I'll open those emails, just because honestly, we have so much on our plates that has to get done that when you have those calls about, hey, I just need 10 minutes of your time.
Is it ever 10 minutes?
Well, and it's not, to be honest. And even if you did have 10 minutes, if you gave every salesperson who asked for 10 minutes of their time, you would be doing nothing else all week long, right? So there's a different approach. It's the partners who get engaged within the community, who attend different events, who participate on panels, etc. But for the purposes of your book, that's CISO Compass, that's where the new CISOs coming into those roles should really encourage their vendors and partners to engage them through those different channels to help build those relationships, and not just a cold phone call or an email with a shiny new object.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, available at Amazon.com and other booksellers.
So you're saying the presence at the events is probably the best way to begin that interaction with the CISO?
Yeah, I think so. Whether it's a dinner event, which there are plenty in town, there are a number of really good, fun, valuable dinner events that different organizations put on that help. And it's not just dinner, there's daytime events as well through different chapters that you can belong to and different events that the vendors will sponsor to be a part of. If I have made that face-to-face contact with somebody and they've said, hey, it was great to meet you, Kevin, today, really enjoyed the conversation, even if it's just a 30-second elevator pitch, here's what our tool does, do you mind if I email you? At that point I can say, no, don't mind at all. Here's my contact information. Or, based on my roadmap and based on our budgets and what we already have in place and just the projects that we have spun up, I don't think this is a good time, but if you want to reach back out to me next year or 6 months down the road, whatever, I'll be happy to talk with you. Those are the types of constructive conversations that the CISO can have with the vendors, because it helps them, right? They don't want to spin their wheels chasing down a potential lead if there's nothing there.
To just waste time going after you when you're
exactly
saying that.
Yeah, and just adding to the madness of our inboxes that that doesn't help anybody.
Absolutely. So how do you decide which events, if we're looking at the salesperson now and that's great advice, Kevin. Where am I going to find you? What attracts you to any event that I could find you at?
Well, there are a lot of different CISO community events. Some are annual summits that most organizations as a vendor should know about. I won't rattle them all off for the fear of losing one or two or leaving one or two out. But they're very well-known CISO-type communities, and to be honest, I'm pretty selective these days about which I go to, and a lot of them are valuable. It's just prioritizing which ones I think are going to, be the biggest bang for my buck. No pun intended, because there's really no cost.
What's that? If I was to get inside your mind, what makes you say, "Oh, I've got these 2 events or 3 events this week," and what's going to make you go to one event versus the other event?
Good question. So a number of different variables, and some are not necessarily indicative of the value of the conference or the event. It could be just a scheduling issue. It could be whether or not I've got too many things on the plate that's going on that week, some projects, board report, whatever it might be that needs to be focused on. And some might be, hey, I know some of my peers who I've got great relationships are going to be there, and I would just love to catch up with them, and it's been a while since we've connected. Or if I know it's a vendor that I have an interest in who's sponsoring it, that I've heard really good things about. Because, as CISOs will tell you, and you know this, having certainly your background and experience, we talk amongst ourselves, right, with all the different community members, and we'll say, yeah, this is a fantastic solution. Implementation went very smoothly. The solution delivered the value that we were expecting, and the after support, or the after implementation support, is there. They're very responsive. We can get a hold of them when we need to. It wasn't a implementation and run for the streets and then they're on to the next sales perspective, right? So when they really establish those partnerships with the companies, that's really where the value is, because I think the salespeople switch jobs a lot more frequently than even the CISOs do. Right?
I think that's true.
So them building those relationships is to their benefit, so that when they go to their next job and the next company that they're representing, if they reach out and say, hey, Kevin, I switched positions, I'm now over here. One of the things I highlighted also in the article was, if you do that as a sales vendor, we understand that happens a lot. And this has happened, don't tell me that your competing vendor that you've now gone to is much better than the other one, right? Because what does that tell me about the value that you were pushing for the other solution that you were trying to sell me? So there's some diplomatic dancing there, I guess, if you will. If a salesperson goes to a different company that's in that same industry that they're competing against. That said, those relationships really are key.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really important, is that it's when a CISO has experience and has a positive experience with a particular vendor, that we tend to tell everybody that, oh, this vendor was great, their customer support was great, the technology worked, and even when it didn't, they came in and they wrote some additional code and they got it to work.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff gets shared across our email lists and networking events when we talk to other CISOs. Yep. And so it sounds like that's kind of the foundation for a vendor. So when I'm just thinking about the earlier comments we were talking about, when you get that voicemail that's out of the cold and you have no context with that vendor,
sure.
It just makes it that much more difficult, doesn't it, to prove their case?
It really does. It muddies the water with just the hundreds of vendors that are out there. I'm not going to remember who the vendor was. If I have not heard of them, then unlikely that a voicemail is going to pique my interest. But yeah, that's a very good point.
And different CISOs are really at different points on their maturity curves,
absolutely,
too, right? Or their risk appetite as to new vendors or old vendors.
Absolutely. You've got the early adopters and you've got the laggards. And that's one of the things that I highlighted in that article as well, was, look, you've got to figure out as a salesperson what type of organization you're trying to pitch to. Right? Is this a company that's going to be on the bleeding edge and they're going to be willing to take a look and say, yeah, for a significant discount to be an early adopter, we'll go ahead and take that plunge and help you develop and build out your product and give you feedback as you mature that solution. And there's going to be solutions that, or organizations rather, that the salesperson's trying to get in with, who is on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, and they're 5 years behind the time. So it's really up to the organization to understand who they're trying to pitch to, and to your point, where they are in that spectrum.
Sure. Do you have any final tips that you think our CISOs should know when they're managing their sales people?
I do. This is a busy career, if you will. But at the same time, we're all in this together, if you will. We're trying to add value to the companies that have hired us to do the job that we have. And at the same time, the salesperson is also doing the same thing, right? So coming back to that definition of insanity, there's a different approach that the salespeople can take in delivering the value that their companies need. And at the same time, there's certainly a lot of frustration and noise in the CISO community about the approach that has historically and continues to be used to some extent. But I have worked for individuals in the past where I was truly embarrassed to be in the room with them when they were speaking with the vendors because they abused them verbally. It was truly embarrassing. It was very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So treating them well is key, I think, as part of that partnership. It's not a one-way street. So to that extent, I think any CISO coming into that role needs to understand, there may be times, and quite a few times, where there's not going to be an opportunity to partner, but still treating the person with respect and in a manner that says, hey, I value what you're trying to do, but this is not a good time or it's not a good fit. Mm-hmm. I think that goes a long way.
I think that's very good advice. Well, thanks, Kevin. This has been very illuminating, and I believe it will be very helpful to CISOs because we're all dealing with many different products, right, many different challenges, and I think this would put people on the right road.
So well, I hope so. My pleasure. I appreciate you having me do this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.
Cybereason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. Cybereason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere. Learn more at cybereason.com/CISO stories.